You're listening to the Cash Podcast, creating affluence, success, and happiness with your financial surgeon, Adam Koós, President and Portfolio Manager at Libertas Wealth Management Group at libertaswealth.com.
Hello, everyone. I hope you're enjoying the fall weather. If this is your first time listening or watching, thanks for joining us. The Cash Podcast is produced weekly. And as stated in the intro, Cash stands for creating affluence, success, and happiness. And that's our mission. My hope is for you to learn a little bit more on each and every episode so that you become more successful, wealthier, happier, and more educated than you were when you started listening today. So come back often, subscribe both on iTunes and YouTube. And please note that all links, visuals, charts, and other educational resources can be found on our website at libertaswealth.com. And we've got a treat for you today because this is going to be a little bit different. We've done a couple of podcasts this past summer where we talked about things having nothing to do with money, but things that had everything to do with your family legacy, with not only what's happened before you were here, but after you're gone. So today I'm talking to Laurie Hermance-Moore, an accredited genealogist who works with both individuals and companies, and we're going to talk about that too, here in the Midwest, and she helps them with their businesses and their personal family history needs. So thank you so much for joining me, Laurie.
Thanks so much, Adam. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear about what you have to say. This is so interesting to me. And actually, I'm a little surprised that there's a business need for putting together your family history. So, let's just start there. Tell me more about why there's a need for that.
So, there is a need for professional genealogists to serve attorneys and financial institutions when they need to identify or locate heirs to an estate or a trust. Mm. So what happens is potentially someone dies and they leave no heirs that anyone immediately knows who they are. So an example I could give you is a law firm reaches out to me because a woman dies, she never married, never had kids, has no brothers and sisters, and her parents are deceased. Wow. So then the question is, well, then who inherits? So you look up to her grandparents and you see who were their children. So these would be her parents, brothers and sisters, and then you have to start going down from there. Are any of the nieces and nephews, are they still alive? So and you start going down into cousins and so on. So what you have to do to satisfy the estate is to be able to show well-documented evidence of the family structure and a family tree. And so so it's called forensic genealogy. So a forensic genealogist is one that works serving the law. So, and sometimes it's just that they might know that they had a niece or nephew and they know that those people inherit, but they just can't find them, or their name is so common that they're not sure they're finding the right people. So sometimes genealogy is actually about proving identity and separating identities of people.
That's interesting. In fact, you were just telling me before we started the call today that people are using these DNA kits now. And,
DNA comes up every time.
I got to hear about this.
So let me tell you a little bit about DNA, because DNA is so much in the news that I'm sure everyone listening to this has heard advertisements from Ancestry trying to sell DNA kits, especially around the holidays. So that's coming up. But what's going on with DNA is that there are different testing companies. Ancestry is the biggest one, but there's also Family Tree DNA and MyHeritage and a few others. 23andMe is another one. So what happens is you test your DNA and it goes into this large pool of results. And one of the things that you have to determine when you're going to test is, are you going to allow those results to be, how widely shared are they? So you can do things like you can make yourself use a pseudonym, make yourself anonymous that way. So you can kind of protect yourself that way. But where it all came to a head a couple years ago was there's a website called GEDmatch where people upload their DNA, and it was getting used by law enforcement. And now there's a pretty heavy opt-in process. if you want it used by law enforcement. But when you watch TV shows like The Genetic Detective with CC Moore,
Right.
where she's solving cold cases. So it's cool because she's going back, 20, 30 years and being able to solve the cases. Well, how does that work? Well, what happens is she has the DNA from the crime scene. They're comparing it to DNA in these broad consumer, not places like Ancestry. They have to go through places like GEDmatch. So, Ancestry and some of those places distinctly say that it's not being used for law enforcement. But if there's enough of a pool of people out there who, what it allows them to do is when she can compare that DNA to a bunch of people who have tested, she can start creating assumptive family trees. So it's exactly the same process as if you came to me and you said, I'm adopted and I have no idea who my parents are. I would have you test in a bunch of places. I would see who your matches are. I'd start building out their trees, and I'd eventually figure out where you fit. And that's the exact way she's solving crimes, is she's taking the DNA that's out there, creating trees, and figuring out by the matches to the crime scene where people fit in certain families, and eventually she gets to their identity. But I would tell you about DNA. If you're thinking about doing DNA, just know that it hides nothing. So if something happened in your family that you may not know about, you'll find out. So for example, I'm adopted. So I know who my birth mom is. I know who my birth father is. But 6 months ago, I suddenly got a match on Ancestry, and it was a half brother I didn't know about.
No way.
So that happened to me, so it happened to me. It can happen to anyone. I have a high school friend, and he said to me that suddenly his older sister got a half brother match. This friend hadn't tested, but his sister had. Okay. Turned out they had a half brother that they didn't know about. Their parents are their parents are deceased, and they welcomed him into the family. And sometimes, it goes a little better if the people who caused the situation, shall we say.
Sure. Yeah. Very politely put. I appreciate that.
If they're not alive now, sometimes things go better. But I will say that literally anything can happen if you put your DNA out there. So just be prepared for that.
Wow, that's fascinating. Well, we talked about the forensic side, estate planning, when there isn't family and where it's helpful there. What are some of the reasons that people, just individuals, families, put together their family legacy?
Right. So, as people get older, they start thinking about really what their legacy should be. And I know, Adam, you encounter this all the time because you've got people who are thinking about their financial legacy and creating stability for themselves and for their heirs. So
right.
That's one thing that people think about. But legacy can be thought of as a bigger thing than that. It's not just money. If you think of legacy as the thoughtful process of deciding on the gifts that you're going to share with future generations, your gifts are a lot more broad than just money. Your gifts can be gifts of property. They can be gifts of your experience, of your insight, providing what have you learned along the way? For example, I know Libertas works with Life Bio. Mm-hmm. So, you might want to mention what that is. But
sure. I'll just mention it real quick, I guess, since you mentioned it. Life Bio is a company here in Ohio that will basically interview you over multiple interviews, or you can do it yourself and answer, call it about 74 questions. And they have a million different questionnaires and different types of life biographies that you can create. But the one that we work with them on is one that includes your childhood to high school to college to military, if they're applicable, to, meeting somebody, getting married, having kids, your work, all that. So it pretty much puts together your life story while you're living.
Right.
And it can, I think it's really valuable for people who are, when you want to capture their parents' story before they're gone, or their grandparents, or their own story before they're gone, for their kids and their grandkids, because
Right.
obviously we lose that story as soon as one generation's gone. That next generation is the last well, I don't even think they capture all the entire story. I think there's a lot we can always learn from our parents, right?
Right.
But that's what life
So,
bio is. Yeah.
well, and that's exactly where any genealogist is going to tell you where to start. So they're going to tell you to capture the stories from your oldest relatives. And, obviously you should capture your own story as well. But if I were giving someone advice and how do you get started with building your family history legacy, you could start by capturing your own story, capture your relative's story, talk to your older relatives about who they remember, about because a genealogist is going to start at that point to go backward in time. So genealogy, traditional family history genealogy starts with you and goes backward.
Right.
That's the difference actually with forensic genealogy. So the way I usually put it is, normally genealogy, you're chasing dead people, but forensic genealogy, you're chasing people who are alive. So you start in the past and you come forward because you want living heirs. You got to have
Sure.
someone to give the money to. But if you're going back in time, you're going back generation after generation. But so when people are working on a family history legacy, I see that it can include a lot of things. It can include the stories. It can include the memorabilia. Sometimes families, end up with certain things getting passed forward, and they may not understand what those things are.
Sure.
Well, a genealogist can help you figure those things out. There are ways to identify photographs, for example. I have a colleague that specializes in that. She can look at a photograph and she can tell by the clothing,
Wow.
name of the photographer, often get it down to just a few years of time of when it was
That's
taken.
incredible.
Yeah, very, very interesting stuff. But, you can strengthen your own family by creating knowledge of the family. So I think this is one thing, as people get more and more minimalist and some of these things are getting lost, some of that important knowledge of where the family came from, historically, where was the family farm? How did our ancestors migrate across the country?
Hmm.
What struggles did they have? All of that is able to be figured out and,
Wow.
figured out and documented. And what a gift for a future generation
Oh,
that you
huge.
that you captured that and didn't lose it.
I mean, it's priceless. I mean, and obviously the time and the work it takes to find it, but that's information that if you don't get it, you're never going to get it. Right. I mean, well, I shouldn't say you're never
Exactly.
going to get it. I mean, somebody's got to do the work though.
Well, it gets harder. I can't say that your grandkids couldn't do genealogy and figure a lot of it out, but it would be heartbreaking to lose some of the stories
Sure.
because
Totally agree.
I spend all my time in old records, and I can tell you that I can piece together a story sometimes if, let's say, there's a court case, or let's say, somebody was in the Civil War and left a pension file. Sometimes there'll be a story there, but it's not the same. It's not the informal stories. That's what I hate to see get lost.
Yeah. The stuff that's not as not on, it's not a headline. It wasn't in the paper. Right.
It's not, a relatively speaking headline for that family, right?
Right. What are some of the fun and interesting things that you've uncovered in the research when you're helping families put together their legacy?
I'll tell you, this is why this is such a great, it's such a great thing to
Yeah, I want to hear
do
a story or two.
as your career. I every single client, every single time I've worked on my own family, I found something weird and unique. So
Really? Okay.
I'll give you probably my favorite one. I got several I can tell, but one of my
No
favorites
shortage of
is,
stories.
yeah, I have no shortage of stories.
Yeah.
My fourth great grandfather, who this was in 1786, he was in far eastern Tennessee in an area called in an area where it's called sorry, completely blanking. The Over Mountain men lived there. So these
it was your genealogical phone that rang that threw you off.
Yeah, it was.
It sounded
phone.
It sounded like the black phone.
Somebody with a genealogical emergency, right?
Right. Sorry, go ahead.
Let's act like that's happened. So
no, you're fine.
It's the Watauga settlement in eastern Tennessee. So the people who lived there were defying the British. So the British had said, you can't cross the mountains and go live there. And they lived there anyway. So these were very independently minded people. And my ancestor, when he was only, 22, 25 years old, this part of the US, right after the Revolutionary War, decided they wanted to form their own state. And they were going to call it Franklin after Benjamin Franklin. You can Google this. Lost state. Google the lost state of Franklin, and you can find out about it. Well, there was a petition that the settlers signed. My ancestor signed the petition.
Wow.
It was crazy. So, that was so things like that keep you going. When you find out that your ancestor participated in history, my Civil War ancestor, who grew up in a big family up in Hancock County, Ohio, that family sent 5 sons to the Civil War. The Findlay area, actually, Hancock County sent a lot of people. And in his pension file, I had known that this ancestor, whose name is also Adam, my ancestor Adam, great-great-grandfather, had become very ill at Shiloh and at that battle, which was in western Tennessee near the Mississippi River. I had known before that he had been taken on a hospital boat up to St. Louis. But what I didn't know until I read his pension file in detail was that his brother, their father had gotten word that Adam was ill back here in Hancock County in Ohio. Sent another son, Adam's brother, to go take care of Adam. And it was Joseph, who negotiated with the officers to get Adam onto that hospital boat.
Huh.
How cool is that?
That's really cool. Yeah.
Super, super cool.
That's detailed history too. I mean,
I know but what richness does that add to the history? I was able to figure out for a client that their great grandfather the question was, were they involved with a Detroit gang in the 1920s?
Okay.
And I was able to map out the homes of the gang members and the home of this great grandfather. And they literally lived within a block or two of each other.
No way.
So did they know each other?
Wow.
In the Jewish community in Detroit in the 1920s, odds are pretty good.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So knowing that, and kind of on a similar note, a different client a couple months ago found out that her grandfather was part of the 1920s Chicago political machine. There were a lot of articles written about this man in the paper, and he was very much a party loyalist, and the things he was doing it was clear it wasn't ethical. I mean, clear it wasn't ethical, but you don't always like research somebody and find, oh, he's got 120 articles written on him.
Right. Yeah.
What do we do with that? But that just gives you an idea of, I could tell you right now, like, land your ancestor owned and tell you exactly where it is and probably get you a street view of it.
Wow.
Can we find
I love technology? Yeah.
Can we find their old home? Can we find the church they went to? Can we find old church registers? Can we find where a court record 200 years ago, this was before there was a highway department, right? So local courts would assign work gangs of local men to build roads. So I can tell you what road your ancestor built. I can tell you that they were contracted to build the local jail and build the courthouse. Like there are a lot of things, those kind of records that still exist. So that's what keeps me going, is uncovering those clues and finding those stories. And that's where I think people would be really surprised at how much detail you can still learn.
Yeah, being that half my family's from Hungary, you got me wanting to go look up street views of my family's homes overseas now. So it's maybe I mean, how do people get started with, building and documenting their family's, legacy when, let's just say, all they have is a box of stuff, pictures, belongings, they're busy, but they
Right.
want to capture that history. How do
Right.
they get started?
Well, the first thing to always do is talk to your older relatives while they're still with us. I mean,
Great
if
advice.
you
Yeah.
know, and that's really good advice at this time of year.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Lots of people, this year's weird. We
Yeah.
all know that.
Yeah.
But you might be doing a Zoom call or a phone call with an older relative. Take the time to really talk to them. Write down some of the things that they're saying. Ask them things that they remember. Maybe ask them about what going to school was like. Ask them what relatives they regularly saw. Write down the names. Any little act like that of starting to document can keep something from being lost for your family. Another thing that people can do is they can try to locate and preserve the family memorabilia that exists. So I'll tell you what typically happens is there'll be somebody in the family who will have the stuff.
Okay.
It could be somebody who's already interested in genealogy, but ask around and find out who has it. Is there a family Bible? Are there scrapbooks? Are there photographs? Try to look at some of that stuff. If those kind of things need to be preserved, there are people who can help you with that. So, you don't have to get overwhelmed with it. But those are ways that most genealogists would tell you to get started, is capture what's within your own family first. Take a good look at it. Then from there, you decide, well, do I want to add to this knowledge? And if you want to add to the knowledge, that's when you're going to start researching and documenting back in time. And it's not I'll tell you, the kind of research that this is not for everyone. It's detailed, it's time consuming. Is it super rewarding?
Sounds
Yes.
like it is. Yeah.
It's super rewarding if you get into it, but it's not everyone's cup of tea. In which case, there's professionals that can assist you with it. And you can approach it at any level you're comfortable with. If it's a level where you maybe want to learn to do some of the research, a genealogist can coach you. And I'd recommend doing that.
I'm assuming this is how you work with your clients?
Oh, yeah. I help people if they want to do it themselves, but I also do it for them.
Okay.
So there are certain points in time when probably you need a professional. So if you do it yourself, it gets really hard before 1850.
Oh, okay.
So, and there's for a lot of reasons. It's, especially here in the Midwest, Ohio started settling in the late 1790s. We were, had a lot of people by 1850s, but the records just aren't as good. So, you're having to use things like probate files and court records and land records and so on to be able to establish who's who.
Okay.
And that's a lot about what genealogy is you need to accurately connect generations. And that's where people can go wrong, because if you don't accurately connect generations, then you're chasing the wrong people and wasting a lot of hours. And that's where you might want to make sure you've got it right.
Okay. That makes sense. Well, you and I have an article that we wrote together that's going to be coming out on Monday. It'll be on our website. We'll be distributing it to all the people on our distribution list. So I'll mention that in a second here as well. But we also, I just found out today that Laurie put together a free download to help you start thinking creatively and to help you start your own family history legacy. And if you want to download that, you go to heritagebridge.com/Libertas. And I'll read that again. It's heritagebridge.com. So heritagebridge.com/LIBERTAS. And that's a free download. You can start filling it out and get started with this process,
Right.
kind of get your mind working.
Right. 4 ways to build your family history legacy. So
Yeah.
this will help you understand some of the things that we talked about and, give you some places to get started. But, I'd just like to close by encouraging people to think about your family history as part of legacy that you can leave. Obviously you're going to leave a financial legacy. It's really important to be able to pass on what you've learned to your children, but keep in mind that you can be the bridge from the past to the future. So we're at a point in time where some of those materials may be getting lost. And if you can capture those and capture the family stories before your older relatives are gone, you've created something that's priceless for your kids.
I totally agree. Yeah, I think this is huge and hugely important. And like I said earlier, completely priceless. You can save a bunch of money, retire. You can leave a financial legacy. You can do things that are, positively affect charities and organizations that mean a lot to you. But capturing your family's history so that it can continue to get built, as time goes on, moving forward, doing the hard part of catching, what's already happened in the past, I think is really advantageous to any family. But thank you so much for joining me today, Laurie. And that's it for today's show. Again, I want to repeat that Laurie's website is heritagebridge.com if you want to contact her, if you want to reach out, get some help with your genealogy. And please feel free to share this episode with your friends and family, of course. If you'd like to discuss your personal situation further, Laurie'd be happy to do that. And in terms of financial planning, retirement planning, estate planning, with Libertas Wealth, myself, just remember, you never have to be a client to ask a question. If you'd like to discuss your personal situation further, please, by all means, reach out. If you'd like to set up an introduction call or Zoom meeting with us, just head over to our website at libertaswealth.com, and you'll get access to our calendar there. And as I always say, there's thousands and thousands of podcasts out there, and you chose to give us ours a listen today. So thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe both on iTunes and YouTube. And remember, you can sign up at libertaswealth.com to get these updates, as well as the article I just mentioned that Laurie and I wrote, the free download that she has, as well as other screencasts, podcast videos, and articles delivered directly to your inbox. So feel free to follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/Libertas Wealth. I'm on Twitter at Adam Koos, as well as Instagram at Financial Surgeon. So thank you so much once again for hanging out with us today, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Cash Podcast with your financial surgeon, Adam Koos. To see any charts or images that were mentioned in this show, or to check out additional articles, videos, and other educational resources, head over to libertaswealth.com.